Hello and welcome back to All for United WFC. We're rocking and rolling finally. Zigiotti Olme is a Manchester United player. As you can see, you've got Liberty with me to talk all through it as we go into a key qualities, a best position, all kind of things on the international stage and at club level as well. If you've been here before, you know what a player profile entails. Firstly, Liberty, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. We're fully in the swing of the transfer window now after some quietness for the Euros. But yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, the Euros kind of distracted everybody in there for a couple of weeks. Just took everyone away from transfers for a little bit, and now we really are going to start kicking along. That's for sure. So I'll ask you the first question I ask everyone on these player profiles. Just your initial thoughts on this signing.
I think this is really good. A player that's got both international experience. Obviously, she's a Swedish international, but also experience in the WSL. Obviously, most people know her from playing at Brighton as recently as not the season just gone, but season before, for a couple of years, where she had the captain's armbands at points. She was a really key player for Brighton, but then obviously went to Bayern, has also played in the Damallsvenskan back in Sweden from her youth ages until she joined Brighton. So a player with a wide range of experience, very good player, and I really like this signing. I think this is really good for United.
Yeah, because it's certainly been, when I put the story out the first time around, there was certainly some mixed I think feeling towards it, whether that's whether it's certainly a player that we need or all those different kind of things on her quality. And I want to come back to that in just a second. But in terms of her position, obviously we know midfield and things like that. Where would you, I guess, say her is a best position to really get the most out of her?
I think either a defensive mid or an 8, sort of like more traditional box to box. I think she's got both really good qualities in defence, but also in attack when needed to support further up. And I think, somewhere there is going to be her sweet spot for United and where they're going to get the best out of her.
That kind of leads me on there, just very quickly on to in terms of her qualities, in terms of what United fans can expect to see from people who haven't watched her before, whether that's at Bayern or on the international stage. What can fans expect from her coming into this side?
I think you can expect a player that's going to get stuck in. I think she likes to sort of get involved in the midfield, especially in tougher games where midfield might be slightly outnumbered for whatever team she's on, whether that's Sweden or Bayern or whoever. She's got really good reaction times, which I think is slightly a feature that's not always appreciated, but whether it's she's lost the ball, somebody else around her has lost the ball, it's a loose ball, she's going to be there as quick as possible. She's going to try and look to go from defence to attack like that, which I think is going to really help United. She's got a really good pass, which I also think is great. I think, people who watched Sweden versus England would have seen her assist for Stina Blackstenius's goal, which was just absolutely across the pitch, was excellent. I think that's something she's going to bring when she's further up in attack. Also, she's going to get down and dirty and get into the nitty-gritty of defence when her team's without the ball and she needs it back.
You mentioned the England-Sweden game just quickly there, and that's something I wanted to touch on. So I know obviously I'm asking you questions here, but I think from my point of view in terms of her qualities, what you've just mentioned there is exactly what I saw in that game versus England at the Euros. Because I think my first message after the game was to somebody, that Sweden midfield, especially before Aslani went off, was unbelievable. Between her, Angodal and Aslani, I thought those three in particular were just exceptional, and particularly her breaking the play up. And I think that goes under the radar a little bit, reading the game, especially in a position that she plays in. If that's going to be in defensive midfield for United next season, you have to be able to read the game. And I think particularly her has got that quality in abundance. So just a follow-on question to that, really. Do you think her stock rose a little bit after the Euros? Obviously, Sweden had that, I don't want to call it a disappointing exit, but certainly would have felt like it after how the game went versus England. But do you think her stock did rise a little bit? Because she didn't play maybe as much for Bayern last season as maybe seen for previous clubs.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Bayern move was always going to be slightly iffy. I think not iffy as in she wasn't up for the challenge, because I think she generally was at that level, but they essentially were bringing her in because they'd lost Lena Oberdorf to her ACL, and that was going to be their one big midfield signing. And then suddenly they didn't have her for a season, so they had to figure something out. And then they go and lose Georgia Stanway as well further on into the season. So it was all a bit of a mess. And maybe she, definitely didn't get as much minutes as one would have preferred. So I do think she slightly fell off the radar, especially on the European stage, because Bayern went out really disappointingly to Lyon in the quarterfinals. And, some people may not be watching, every Bayern game, especially in the Champions League, if it clashes with Arsenal, like it would have, or Chelsea or whoever. So I think she probably went under the radar a bit there, but then, definitely reinversed herself in for Sweden. I think she split her time sort of between her and Hannah Bennison, who also used to play in the WSL for Everton. But I think she really proved that she's a really key part of this midfield. I think she worked really well with Angeldon. I think that's something that can be replicated for United. Getting a good partnership in the midfield always works. And I think, she really improved herself and brought her name back up in the list of good midfielders in Europe. And I think, her stocks have definitely gone back up again.
You're very good at leading me on to my next question, because you've just mentioned there about forming the partnerships for Sweden. And my next question was literally, who do you think she could work well with at United? In terms of the current crop of players at the time of recording this, who do you think would, I guess, fit in around her? Who do you think is going to suit her play style a bit?
I think she's coming in with the expectation that Dominic Janssen will fall back into defence, into a centre-back role. So potentially not that sort of partnership in the midfield, but I do think she works really well when there's a really good attacking midfielder in front of her. So someone like Ella Toon or Grace Clinton, depending on who's playing, where they are positioned. I think that would be really good, because she needs somebody in front of her to progress the ball and go into the box. She's very good at getting it going, but her strong suit isn't, going in and making the goal for herself. She is sort of that link man between defence and attack. That being said, I just said, she's not going to have a partnership in midfield with Janssen, but if Janssen's starting at the back, if it's Maya Letizia, who we expect to, play every minute, she's sort of superwoman, that sort of progression from the back into midfield will be really key. And then also she's really good support for that back line if it's a bigger game where they're not going to have as much as the ball as they would like. Then she's going to be able to break that play down and make sure that the back line is protected in places that I don't think potentially some United midfielders have really had before.
No, I think when you're looking at the players there with potentially Mia Zara as well, she was brilliant at that last season. I think if you've got both of those there, progressing the ball forward, and whether that's Alatoon that's potentially in a 10 or somebody else a little bit further forward, I think that can work particularly well, in my opinion. And like you, I think my expectation is Janssen to drop back into the back line, just because I don't have that many defenders either, and midfield. And that was one of the things actually when I put my tweet out, that why do we need another midfielder? Because if you're looking at the Manchester United women's squad, I think midfield is the one area where you don't need anyone there, because it's the most stacked position, whereas wingers and potentially in the back line, it's not as strong depth-wise from that point of view. In terms of that, do you think she's coming in, maybe not with the expectation, but do you think she's going to be a starter for United going into next season? And when I say a starter, I mean maybe in the WSL or in the Champions League. Do you think she's coming in to be that, or do you think there's going to be more of she's going to be more of a rotation kind of player?
I think she's coming in with the expectation to get really good minutes, whether that's starting or whether that's, playing 40 minutes, 35 minutes at the end of the game. I think that's probably it. I don't think she's coming in to see a game out. That's definitely not what is going to be happening, because, you don't, this sounds like quite, but you don't spend 1 year in Germany at, Germany's best team to leave if you're not getting something. Like, that's not really how I see football working. So I think she's coming into United to get really good minutes, whether that's starting in the midfield or getting really good games. And also, if you're playing Champions League and league football, and then once, sort of crunch time comes, then you have Subway Cup and FA Cup as we get into sort of 2026, then you're going to need a good, strong squad that the levels don't dip. If you're starting a different 11 or you're substituting some players out for league games over Champions League games. So I think she's coming in to bolster the squad in positions where they potentially are slightly lacking, despite having, many midfielders, maybe defensive midfielders, a position that needs some support. But I expect her to get really good minutes and, definitely pushing to start, if not being an out-and-out starter from the beginning.
I would certainly hope so, because I think, as you said there, I don't think you leave Bayern, where she could have stayed and played a rotation part at Bayern. And I'm going to be honest, I know this is a United channel. Bayern will probably win more than United next season when you're looking at that kind of thing. So she could have stayed there in an environment, obviously, that she knew for the past year. My personal thing is she starts in that defensive midfield position. And I was going to ask the question what this means for Janssen, but I think you've already answered that in terms of what we both have in terms of her dropping back. Whether she starts or not is another question, and we'll obviously wait to see what happens to her. But I do think, but I also don't think it's bad having two options. Janssen, albeit I think her best position still is centre back, although the Euros maybe wouldn't show that as much. It's good, I think, to have a couple of options there if you need it. She doesn't have to play every single game, and Janssen can maybe come in and Olme can drop to the bench and so on. So I think from that point of view, it's good to have those particular options. Talking of priorities and things like that, obviously, I mentioned, I guess, some of the fan reaction to it about not needing a midfielder and things like that. When you were looking at United's women's squad going into the summer, is this a position you thought United would need? If you were in charge of United, would this have been a priority, I guess, for you to push on next season with the Champions League qualifiers, in a few weeks as well?
Perhaps not, in all honesty. Perhaps it's not the one that you go, oh yes, definitely. But I think that's more looking at midfield as a whole. If you're breaking down each position, maybe you are looking at defensive midfield and you're thinking, if we get 2 injuries here, we don't actually have an out-and-out defensive mid. And whilst we've seen somebody like Grace Clinton play at the 6 for England at the Euros, which was really random, I must say, it's not somewhere you want to play like her playing all the time, or you don't want Ella Toon playing as the 8, week in, week out if you get a couple injuries. So I think it's a position that on the surface doesn't look like it, but actually if you break it down, was needed at least one. And this is a really good option for that one, but potentially, maybe a winger or 2 is probably the direction most people expected.
No, for sure. And I think my final kind of question on her as a player, obviously she spent a few years, or quite a few years actually, obviously in the Damallsvenskan as well, which is obviously a league that you keep an eye on, a couple of clubs over there. So I guess my kind of question on her, I guess development, because United have got this, I guess, philosophy at the moment in signing younger players to I guess, build up and hopefully be ready in a couple of years for the squad. Obviously, I wouldn't say 27 is not old because that's my age, so I'm not saying that that's old. However, it's not necessarily on the young, I guess, profile side. She's 28 later this year as well. From that side of things, has her game always been like it's been in the last kind of year or so, or do you think it's developed in a different way? What kind of, I guess, career path, or how have you seen her career path kind of develop on the pitch and I guess off it?
I think it's been a steady growth. I think, the jump from, so she started at some smaller clubs, but her first proper professional club was Hammarby, which is, for people that don't know me, my big club in Sweden. She spent a couple of years there, but they were a yo-yo club at that time, sort of going up and down between First League and Second League. And then she went to Gothenburg, which then becomes BK Häcken, where she was much more solidified, kind of grew quite rapidly. She was quite determined. And that's also when she ended up getting her first call-up for Sweden to the national team and going to her first major tournament for the World Cup in 2019. And then she gets her move to Brighton. I think, it's a natural progression. It's not sort of overnight sort of sensation, but it has been steady. And I think that this is a move that solidifies that. I think this is her seeing her worth and knowing that she can make a real impact for United. And yeah, to come to United in what people consider the best league in the world, for a top 4 team that are going to be pushing for titles, whether that's League Cup, FA Cup, or the Champions League, depending on the qualifiers goes. She knows that this is a team with real ambition and real substance in the league. And I think that this is her saying, I know at my age what I can bring to a team. And also, when you have a lot of younger players, especially in the starting 11, to have somebody who's played across Europe now, played Champions League, played internationally, to come in and go, look, here's a little bit of direction. I'm not saying she's going to completely change everything up, but it is some experience that some other players don't have, who've never left England or never left United even. So that is slight stability, I think, that is really going to help United.
No, I like to hear that, actually. And I think if you saw me kind of half laughing through that, it's because I didn't know whether you were going to say Champions League or not. When you were going, I'm fighting for title or pushing for titles, and you listed the first 3, and I thought, is she going to say Champions League or not?
It's a possibility, You've got a really hard team, really hard group coming up in those qualifiers against a team called Hammarby. But, I'm not going to write you off. It's a possibility.
So that's why I started laughing. There was nothing to do with anything that you did say on that one. A very quick question before I get you to rate it out of 10, because I don't even know if you're going to have the answer to this, but it's just one that sprung to mind that I've asked on previous, player profiles. And it's more just about, the personality of her, if anything you've seen, in and around squads, obviously, whether that's with the Sweden camp or with Bayern and Brighton and so on, in terms of what kind of, person that, we're bringing over to United as well.
I can't say too much because I'm not entirely sure, but Swedish people are very diplomatic. They're very calm, quiet, but when it's needed, they will step up and take charge and will have the sense of direction and push. They're quite driven people. I think that's probably what's coming to United, but on a more acute level, I'm not sure, but it's somebody who wore the armband for Brighton, who has that leadership, which I think is going to help.
No, for sure. That it's always a hard question to answer, so I'll let you off on that one, unless you know the player, obviously, personally. So yeah, the final question is just to rate this signing out of 10. I'm intrigued to see where you put this one, because when I always ask these questions, we have a range of answers sometimes with some of these. So you could either answer it from a player point of view, a club point of view, and kind of merge the two, or you can do 2 separate ones.
I think I'm a really positive person, and I think I may have said the same answer when I was on the Sandberg. I'm going to say 8 for both her as a player and also her as for United. For her as a player, I think it's more minutes than was guaranteed at Bayern. I'm not saying she wouldn't have played if she stayed at Bayern, but I think there is definitely more sustained minutes at United. And in an ever-evolving Swedish national team, which is going to have a new coach tomorrow, because Gerhardsson is leaving and Tony Gustafsson's coming in, that's always a positive because nobody's place is solidified. Also for United, as I said, it's somebody with experience, she's done the things that other players in the squad haven't done, play Champions League, play across Europe, have that sort of pedigree behind her. And I think that's going to be really positive. And also it's, I would say, a position that was needed. It's cover, it's rotation ability to be had. And yeah, so for both her as a player and also for United, I'm going to say them at an 8. And I'm almost certain that's what I also said for Anna Sandberg this time last year.
As soon as we come off here, I'm going to rewatch that and see if I can find what your score was for Sandberg, to see if I can find that one out. I think it's a solid 8 at the very least. I think, there's a bit of skepticism about whether it's a position we need. I think it is. Personally, I think people forgot that our defensive midfielder last season was Hinata Miyazawa, who has played in the front 3 for Japan and also as an 8 and a 10. And then we kind of tried to convert into a 6 as well. And Dominic Janssen, who has played there before, but is mainly a centre-back. So I feel like this is a position we needed. Maybe not the first one on people's list, but certainly one that we needed. So yeah, we'll round it off there. Olme, welcome to Manchester United. If you do end up watching this or anyone associated with it, we are delighted to have you with us. Liberty, where can people find your kind of work and everything? I have a feeling this is not going to be the last time you're on here this summer with a transfer, if should United keep making some more.
Yeah, everything, excuse me, is just my name, Liberty Simons. Pretty standard, just the boy's name with an S on the end. And yeah, do WSL stuff, do mainly European stuff, whether that's, Bundesliga, Allsvenskan, and look, United have a qualifier coming up potentially against a Swedish side called Hammarby that we've already spoke about. So yeah, who knows what's going to happen.
Absolutely. So I'm sure we'll see you. Well, we will see you at some point, I'm sure, over the next month. But you've been absolutely amazing, as always, to chat to. If you're new around here, make sure you're liking this video and subscribing. If you haven't already, all of our social platforms are all for United WFC. Wish to see you guys in the next one.